Everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. All right. Good morning, everybody. Hello. Hello. It says it's on. Yeah, the light is on.
Test,
Chris said
test.
he's
One, two,
gonna go
three.
check it out.
Testing, testing.
So,
Test, test. There we go. We're good. Chris, is it
hello,
flipped?
1, 2, 3.
Yep. I think so.
Testing. Oh, it's working.
1, 2, 3.
It might
there,
be
it's
a little
working.
bit up
Can you guys hear me now? No.
closely. Well, I can. The Lord be with you. Yeah, that's how we do it.
All right, now can you hear? No. Hello, hello, hello.
It's working. It's just
Has to be
Just
really
quiet.
close, I'm told.
How about me? Oh, I sound okay.
It's what happens when you hire an amateur. Is it working? Can you hear me? No. Well, I don't know. I could just shout. How about if I use this? No? Okay. How about if I hold it? Then can you hear me? Okay. I'll just hold it really super close. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Linda Landwehr. It's my privilege to be the president of the church council here at Farmington Lutheran. And on behalf of the other council members, we appreciate all of you being here today. Will you please raise your hand if you have not signed in? We got everybody? Oh. Okay. Awesome, we've got everybody. So we have a few thank yous to do before we begin. First of all, we're very grateful to Connie Honrud and Marla Sloss, Pat and Dick Orndorff for running the kitchen and preparing the delicious tater tot hot dish. So thanks, everybody. And cleaning up. Dick is doing dishes. So good job. And then Clay, I think it was Clay who did the setup. Did anybody else help with setup that I need to thank? Okay. All right. What? Were you saying something? No? No? Oh, I thought Paul was saying something to me. And then Chris Lynch and Jen Watts, who took care of all of the technology for today. I'm very grateful for that because I couldn't do that. And of course, thank you to our fabulous pastors, Pastor Jeff, Pastors Ben and Kristen, and they all worked to develop the agenda and the presentation today, for which I am eternally grateful. And then, of course, if I take that off, can you hear me? Not very well. All right. And then, of course, Lois and Jen, who prepared and organized all of the materials for today. So thank you very much to those folks. Again, thank you so much for coming. I don't need to tell you guys that 2024 has been a year of transitions here at Farmington Lutheran. The biggest transition began in June when little Noah Isley was born. And we welcomed him into the world, and then Ben and Kristen took some parental leave, and that happened concurrently with Pastor Kevin taking a new call with the ELCA. And then in June, or at the end of August, Pastor Dana arrived and then resigned at the end of November. And then we were fortunate enough to get Pastor Jeff, who arrived earlier this month. And we're very grateful to him for coming to Farmington Lutheran Church. And then we had a rather sad transition in October when we lost one of our council members. Rick Stevens transitioned from here to eternal life, and that was a big transition for the church and for the council. And so these flowers up here, there, can you hear me now? It sounds like you can. These flowers up here are in memory of Rick. And Vicki, wherever you are out there, please take them home with you today. I've got a box and a bag in the office for you to carry them in. And Pastor Kristen is going to say a prayer in memory of Rick.
On these flowers here, there is a little ornament for you, Vicki, with a couple of cardinals. And it says, "I am always with you." Rick loved birds. So we think of him when we see birds, and we trust that promise that he is still here. And gosh, I miss him. And I know a number of you do as well. And so we'll give thanks for him. Let's pray. Jesus, we thank you for the life and the legacy of Rick. We thank you for the faithful service he offered, the leadership, the humor and the faith and the friendship, and the many ways that he was a blessing to us and to so many others. And we grieve his absence here today and from our lives, and we trust that he is home in an eternal and glorious sense. And we give you thanks for the promise that we will see him again. We offer all this in your strong name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Kristen. I think I forgot to mention that if you are on the live stream, make sure that you've signed in, please. There's a link for you to do that. So yeah, 2024 was quite the year of transitions, and if any of you out there are sitting there wondering to yourself, like, has this been more than she was anticipating? Did she lose any sleep? Is she glad to be getting done? The answer, of course, is yes. I was not anticipating all of this, but, you know, I had no idea what to anticipate, so, you know, it was all new to me. But honestly, the privilege of being able to be the president of this congregation during this year has just been incredible. And I will tell you that the silver lining is that I have really deepened my relationships with the staff and our pastors and our council and many of you out there. I've had wonderful conversations, and I feel so privileged and so grateful. So thank you for allowing me that. I also had the privilege of witnessing the Holy Spirit at work here and on the incredible ways that he or she is moving us through this transition process. And it's been a real privilege to have kind of a front row seat to that. Not that I have any insider information. And I would do it all again. I honestly would. If you said to me, if you knew now what you knew, you know, if you knew then what you knew now, would you do it again? And the answer is without a doubt. It has been such a great experience. And I'm looking forward to 2025. You know, we're going to be calling a new senior pastor or pastors, and I'm very excited about that possibility. There'll be opportunities for all of you to participate in those discussions, and I hope you take advantage of that. I'm excited about identifying ways to support and expand our youth ministry. Pastor Ben has been taking care of confirmation, and there really isn't much of a high school ministry program because we simply don't have the resources to do that. And so at council, we're going to have some conversations about how we can hopefully finagle the budget to figure out how we can address that shortfall. And I look forward to that. And then I'm particularly excited, speaking of budget shortfalls, Ron Ryerson has asked to lead a stewardship team here at Farmington Lutheran. And Pastor Jeff and Ron had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and in the weeks to come, you'll be hearing more about that. And of course, stewardship is what fuels everything we do here, and I'm so grateful for everybody's support and partnership in our stewardship. So thank you for that. And I think that is it for that. Okay, so Bob is here. He's our treasurer, Bob Brownwell, and he's here to prod me when I forget to do something. So with that, I'm going to call the meeting to order. and it is 12:17, I think, is what I see up on the clock. I don't know if that's right or not. And just so you know, we follow Robert's Rules of Orders for this meeting, so I'll be calling for motions and seconds, and we'll be voting. Later in the meeting, there will be a ballot that will be passed out so that you can vote for people to serve on council and other ministry teams. We do have a quorum. I counted, what did we say, 74 people? And 67 is enough for a quorum, so we do have a quorum. Those 74 people don't include the folks on the live stream, so thank you for attending, and you'll be added to the quorum. And I think that's it for that. Let's see. Today you should have an annual report they were laying out on a table somewhere, and the ballots again and the agenda will get distributed. Well, the agenda, does everybody have an agenda in your reports or not? No? Okay. Well, let's just go with the flow. Okay, and this QR code is your link for getting the paper ballot, right? Did I get that right? And the materials. I don't understand all that, so. It's for the report. The QR code is for the report. Oh, look, here's the agenda. Somebody planned ahead. Thank you, Kristen. So I think that's my part, and then you guys are up, right? What's that? Oh, thank you. See, I told you I was going to need to be prodded. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please? And if you would state your first and last name, Ron Ryerson. Thank you. Can I get a second for that? Tim Grunler. Thank you. Are there any changes or additions? Okay, with that, all in favor, please signal by saying aye. Opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. All right. You know, just as I'm trained in, I'll be done. So you won't have to suffer through this again. All right, so we need to, what are we approving? The 2020, oh yes, I knew that. So I also need, in your programs or your booklets, there are the minutes from the 2024 meeting, and can I get a motion to approve those? Karen Brownwell, thank you. And Colleen Engman seconded that. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. And now, thank you. It's hard to find good help these days. There.
It says, Pastor's greetings, so hello. Greetings from Farmington Lutheran Church and Kristen and me. So we're going to start off with our greetings by just saying, welcome, thank you for being here, thank you for being church together. The first thing we want to do in this little piece is to introduce our staff and council members and say thank you to all of them. So Linda just sat down, so I'll give you a second. So staff, if you are here, would you just wave or raise your hand? We have had for a long time, the whole time we've been here, an incredible step. Oh, stand up. Kristen says you have to stand. It's not my fault. There's Carissa. Dawn's there. Jen's in the sound booth. Lois is always wandering. Stand up, Lois. Sorry, that was a shot. And where's Jeff? Jeff's over there. You count. You're on staff. So we have an incredible team. It does a lot of things and held a lot of things together in the midst of all those transitions that Linda said. Thank you to all of you for the ways that you have helped make ministry possible these last months and years and through all kinds of things. Would you please thank them with your hands for the work that they have done? Also recognizing Heather Pfeiffer, who is our accountant here, our office manager accountant here. You may sit down, thank you. And then Clay Clay, who is always here, Clay Fleck, who's always here, kind of behind the scenes, moving things and doing things all over the place. Our job descriptions, I don't think they say and other duties as assigned. But that's a big part of ministry, is when something happens or when something needs to be done, especially when we have the capacity, probably in terms of ministry, to have 2 or 3 or 4 other staff people. There's a lot of things. I think Jen's job description has bled onto a 4th page at this point in time, so thanks to all of you for the ways that you have adapted and expanded your ministry and for the sake of being church together in the world. We also want to recognize council. It's been an interesting year to be council because you never just anticipate that a transition is going to happen and all the things that go along with that. So if you are on council, would you please stand to be recognized? If you are on the outgoing council or currently on church council, would you thank them for all the time and work that they have put into all the things too? Thank you. Bob, Linda, all of you. Thanks. You may be seated too. There's a lot of work that goes into being church, and there are people that are not here. Would you just pick up the wireless microphones and stop feeding me words? Here, let me help you out. There, say hi.
I need this at home.
It says
too.
pastor's greetings, plural, so it's you. We're going to move into just a few notes, a mission and ministry from what's been happening in the world. There's a whole lot to do. Annual meetings, we recognize, are sometimes an opportunity to say all of the things that have been happening to all of the people who have already been making that happen. So we won't go through all of the things that we're going to do, but there's a lot that's happened this past year. We could talk about growing worship trends and the 1,300 people that were here for Christmas Eve. We could talk about the 320 kids and youth that learned together on Sunday and Wednesday schools, and the 24 confirmation small groups and their 30 leaders that we've got. We could talk about the thousands of pounds of food that Food on the Fourth has brought in. We could tell stories about how the Long Branch, which is our host for Brute Theology, started off by being kind of suspicious of those church people that were there. And then they went to baking us Christmas treats on Christmas and cocktails and carols and telling us we could do whatever we wanted to. So it's been a really fun thing and a story there. We could talk about the countless ways that you and volunteers have supported us and staff throughout transition and a busy December. And if you want to hear more about any of those things, we'd be happy to discuss them and tell you stories about them in detail. But we want to highlight 4 kind of snapshots of what have been milestone points in ministry in this past year. We're going to talk about Kevin. We'll recognize Kevin. I want to talk about ministry happening, kind of impromptu things, boats that we've built or that you've built and then sailed in terms of being church together. I want to talk about church being in hard and good times, and then talk about sharing the gospel and how you have done that too. So we'll start by talking about Kevin, who's not here, so we can say whatever the heck we want about him. But go ahead.
We started off planning this by saying shorter is better. And then Ben went and wrote 2 pages. So we're just channeling a little Kevin. So a few more words. And we're all listening for baby Noah. So if you hear him, he's waking up from his nap. So 4 stories to sort of try to encapsulate some of what this year has been like. And the first is about Kevin. And if you're on the live stream, we love you. A while back now, Ben and I were in the middle of a typically busy week, and we got a text from Kevin asking if he could connect with us sometime. He wanted to talk about something. And so we said, yeah, we've got 1,000 things going on here, but tomorrow's busy Wednesday, but early next week maybe we'd have some time, or we could maybe swing it Thursday, and I don't know, if you really, we've got an hour coming up this afternoon. And he texted back and said, how about this afternoon, I'll bring lunch. And Ben and I both said, oh no. We knew he'd been doing some discerning, and he came to share with deep apology, as you would expect, and with a lot of gratitude that he was approaching the possibility of another call, which he took. And that is good. That was good for him and for his family. He was a huge gift to Farmington Lutheran and to me and Ben personally. And the timing of his departure was less than ideal, which he knew when Ben and I started discussing, finishing our family and one more baby. And we said, well, Kevin will be around for at least another 4, 5, 6 years. And when that happens, that baby will be in preschool. And so that'll work out great. So it didn't work out that way, but it was the right call for him, and we just want to take a minute to recognize him and all of the work that he did in his time here and the groundwork that he laid for this transition to go as smoothly as it has. He He deserves our thanks. And we also wanted to say thanks to him for assembling the incredible group of leaders who have been in place for that transition that has become multiple transitions. They've weathered it all with grace and humor and faith, and we are grateful. And Linda made me promise that I wouldn't make a big deal out of this, but we are really grateful that you have been in this role this year. And we also want to give you thanks because transitions can be hard, and we have just been overwhelmed by the ways that you have been not anxious, you've been confident, you've been encouraging, you have helped to remind us that the Spirit is here and at work, and good things are still to come. And so we just want to say thank you, and you matter, and you've really been incredible this last year. So thank you.
Yeah, second story. We're going to mention Katie Blaha. She's a Light of Christ recipient, but we're thinking about all the different ministries and programs and things that pop up in the ways that the church has shown up to the community. In the middle of the summer, last summer, Katie, who is a hairstylist, Katie is a member here, she's a power volunteer with her husband, John, and 3 kids. She asked if they and her colleagues and her could run a back to school free haircut clinic, which in the middle of transition, people are in and out. We're still coming back from paternity leave. School is going to start. Programming is getting underway. We're thinking, this might be a big thing. We'll run with it. We'll see what happens to it. And it turned out to be an amazing event that turned into a couple, dozens of haircuts and a backpack drive and a whole bunch of things happening and some momentum from there in terms of relationship with the community. That's an incredible example of the best. That kind of things that we bring, right? It's someone who has gifts that they want to use to serve the community, and the church is the vehicle for making that happen, and it's continued. We've already got conversations going about next year, making it into a little fair, backpack drive, a bounce house, all kinds of things to do for people who are going to school who might need a haircut or two. I think some of our Head Start families participated in that. But that's one of many examples of someone coming to the church and saying, I would like to try this. I would like to do this. I have these gifts and skills that I can use for the sake of the community, and I think this is a way that we can show God's love in a small way and make the gospel implicit in what we do. I think that kind of thing has highlighted you and the church stepping up to step out into this space this year. So I want to acknowledge that. We'll mention Katie's name again, but that's one example of God's work being done and God's amazing love being shown by this congregation and community.
Yeah, and then we wanted to talk just a little bit about community and the ways that you all have been that and more in really good times and really hard times. So we had a baby in June, and we were just floored by how you all joined us in celebrating Noah's arrival and organized a meal train and showed up with cards and gifts and more for the wonderful patience that you have shown as we have attempted to figure out being parents of 4, which turns out that's not a thing you figure out. It's just kind of all chaos all the time.
It's a lot.
So,
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot. And we just continue to be grateful and thrilled by how this community just rolls with it. And that is something that you do not just for us, but for each other in so many ways. When people show up with their new babies, or they've got something exciting that's happened at work, or some big development that deserves to be celebrated, and they know they can bring it here, and it will be celebrated. And that's just the best of community in good times. And you are also the best of community in hard times. We had a stretch this past November where in just a few days we lost Rick, that we talked about a little bit ago, and then a few days later Ethan Powell, a 12-year-old who died from leukemia. And those kinds of sudden deaths, young deaths, are so hard. And you all showed up in such powerful ways. We wanted to have a community event for the Powell family so they could have a space where it might be easier for kids to come and kind of process what they were experiencing than a traditional funeral service in the sanctuary. And that just an initial idea just kind of blossomed into this amazing evening here, hundreds of people in and out of the building, and you all provided the volunteers we needed and the food that we needed and the supplies and materials. And when we were getting ready for Rick's service and thinking about how that would look, again, you were just phenomenal. And that bears itself out all over the place, not just in those sudden difficult deaths, but always. And we celebrate that that's God at work, that when we talk about where does God show up or what does God look like, God looks like that, shows up in each other and how we take care of each other. So thank you for being the hands and feet of Jesus like that.
I still have a microphone on my face. Last kind of milestone highlight that I want to mention is Night of Sharing. We did a Night of Sharing, or Our Faith Stories event, as we called it. So this is the first year where confirmation, affirmation, and baptism is happening in the spring to align a little bit more with graduation festivities and things like that. But also in the fall, because we didn't have anything in particular around Reformation Sunday, we invited you to come, to show up and share a faith story, to talk about where God has been present in your life and how God has been loving in your life and how you have continued to participate in the church. If you participated in that, would you raise your hand? A number of you are here. I see, yeah. A variety of you did. I think almost 20 of you did either faith projects out here or faith stories, and you shared them, and you were vulnerable, and you talked about where God shows up in ways that are incredible in the hardest times and in good times. And the following week, we recapped those things and talked about them, and the students remembered them. We said, do you remember stories? What stories stuck with you? What things stuck with you? And they named you by name, and they said, this happened to this person, and this is how God continued to show up. And they're still here. They're still coming to church all these years later. I think that is one of the things we are called to do in a very tangible way. Cross generations, the church is one of the last actual intergenerational organizations that exists, but we also exist for the sake of sharing the gospel and the good news of Jesus. And you did that. You are called to make disciples and preach the good news, and you shared the good news in your visual pieces, in your spoken pieces. I hope to continue that thing, because you are literally passing down the faith as you have been told to, as you've been asked to in Scripture. And I think that was an amazing point. This is what we do. I've been told by one of my teachers that the church has lots of things. We have books, we have buildings, we have mortgages, we have budgets and councils and mission statements and a lot of baggage sometimes. But what the church also has, perhaps the most valuable thing we have, are stories. We have 2,000 or so years of stories. Some of them are in the Scripture, the books that we have, and some of them are stories of you and where you came from or where your ancestors came from and how God has been faithful all along the way. We have those. And that is the thing that changes people, is stories. And so we look to tell them and share them. And I thank you for the ways that you have done that and will continue to do that. That's the church being church. So thank you for that. There are all kinds of things to talk about. There are many, many pages in your annual reports, those ministry team reports. I invite you to flip through those pages and look what all of our teams are up to.
Don't
you can
flip
read
through
those
them.
on your own.
Take your time and
browse
read
them,
them word
peruse
by
them.
word, because people took time to write them, and they're very interesting.
You can flip through them first and then read them, whatever you would like to do. But there's a lot of them in there. I invite you to read them and take a look at those. But thank you for all the ways that you have been church in many ways in this place, and we're excited. Sometimes we talk about Farmington Lutheran as just kind of as having momentum, and we're just along for the ride, and we haven't been the ones that have spurned that on. We're just stewarding the train wherever it's going and wherever the Spirit is pushing or leading and everywhere in between, so thank you for that. That leads us, not accidentally, into a budgeting conversation, because there are things that move forward. The talk of mission and ministry usually precedes the budget in our council meetings and these meetings, because the budget informs the mission, but the mission also informs the budget. They work both ways, hand in hand. I'm grateful for treasurers who have stewarded the budget for the sake of the mission and not the church for the sake of the numbers and things. So, Bob, thank you for that. And you're up. It's time for you. Well, thank you, Bob, and thank you all.
Lucky me. Welcome, everyone. It seems like just 4 years ago I had the pleasure of doing this, and wasn't really expecting to be here this year, but Dennis, is it back? Dennis Watson had to resign for his heavy schedule at work and other things, and so Kevin asked me to step in, and who can say no to Kevin? So here I am. There was one more change in the finance department of this church, and that is in May, Renee, our finance coordinator, resigned, and so I started to panic. But Karen saw this, and she quickly got out a job description in record time, and we were very fortunate that within 3 weeks we had a wonderful candidate apply and take over the finance coordinator. Her name is Heather Pfeiffer. She's been doing great, and even though I am not going to be treasurer next year, whoever is very fortunate to have Heather. So let's see here. Oops, wrong way. Pastor's reading. Okay. 1 year ago, we were coming off a year like no other in terms of total offerings, and the budget for 2024 was built on the hope of at least coming near that number. Through October of 24, things were looking pretty good, but unfortunately, the offerings in November and December came in well below projections. I would like to jump ahead to a little history of offerings from 2018, when I was last treasurer, through 20. And that was the year of COVID. As you can see, the total offerings dropped off noticeably. Back up in 21, 22, and 23, I don't know what happened. It's good news, but I wanted to show you this to see that this year, while we did better than the other years, we did fall short of 2023, which unfortunately, for a budget that was built on 2023, that's not the best news. So, but all things considered, 821,000 is as good as we have done in every year since 2000, well, except for 2023. Couple notes at the bottom. Typically, just for your reference, we talk about total receipts in the budget, but offerings makes up about 80 to 90% of those receipts. And the percent change of 2024 at 821,000 over 2018 is only 2.2%, but at least it's in the right direction. It could be much worse, especially with the 3 years of COVID in the middle. So the good news is we're doing okay on receipts. The challenge is expenses. While receipts have come in 2.2% higher in the last 7 years, expenses have risen 6.6%. And these are things we just really can't do anything about. Utilities goes up, our insurance has doubled, and the church now building being 20 years old, things are starting to have issues. But going to the last note, the shaded cells, I don't know if you can even see, the shaded cells are here and here. Those are the years that we've had to go to special appeals for the general fund. And thankfully, our congregation has responded generously to these special appeals and to help out our fund balance. Going forward, we hope to once again be able to use the funds from special appeals to go for special and other needed projects. Each year, our budgeting goal is twofold. First, to fund FLC ministries and operations for as much as is realistically feasible. And second, to keep our church finances healthy and sustainable for the future. Over the past 7 years, the net fund balance, which you'll see in a couple of slides, has increased a whole lot, of totaling $12,600. And that tells us that we are using your generous gifts to the fullest extent possible to serve our ministries and missions. Now back to the 2024. I'm just going to go quickly through these at the behest of Janice. Thank you. So the general fund receipts, first of all, our budget for the year was one of the largest ever, $964,300. General fund receipts came in at $891. That's a 5.1% decrease over 2023. But we did our best with general fund expenses coming in at only 0.1 increase over 2023 expenses. Each year the expenses are challenged, but for some reason each year staffing is always a variable that can either, if we find somebody, or we usually meet our expenses or exceed. If somebody leaves, then our expenses stay under control. It's a lousy way to budget, but it does help. Let's see. Okay, next slide. Okay, so with those net receipts and expenses, we did have a net loss of $27,000 in 2024, which isn't really much worse than was projected, which is at $24,000. As was noted, receipts were a little disappointing in November, December. Who knows there could be many reasons for that, whether it's the economy or being in transition or whatever. The Mind the Gap appeal actually was quite successful. That started in May, and the response totaled $36,400. That's helped a long way. It would have been a really bad year if we had not had that special appeal. The appeals for the other 3 years are as noted there. Okay. Just a few other numbers from our balance sheet. Our current general fund balance is $228,850. That's obviously a little less than our 2023 balance because we had a deficit. Dedicated funds, our cash balance stands at $216,000. That is about $65,000 higher than normal. And while I won't get into all the details of why that is so, it comes from a government COVID program that Dennis Watson found and took advantage of, applied for some employee retention credits. In November, we got 4 checks for totaling $64,500. That money isn't quite ready for us to use because the government, being the government, they want to audit that number. They sent out the checks, and now they want to see if they did the right thing or not. So go figure. But one of the 4 payments has been audited. They knocked it down from a $40,000 request to like $12,000. There's a good chance, and hopefully, that the other 3 checks will hold. But that's in our capital reserve fund at the moment, and it's a nice cushion to have, especially when we have some important projects coming up. Lastly, the mortgage balance. Good news there. We're down to $831,000, paid down $96,400 in principal. And can you imagine what that would do for our budget when we get that paid off? That's, I always have to, or at least when I was doing this before, talk about the Strengthening Faith appeal. That was done in 2011. I've only been here about 30 years when that happened. Pastor Phil put this out, and don't ask me why, but I was rummaging through some old papers, and I found the brochure for Strengthening Faith, and that was in 2011. And the goal then was to raise $180,000 over 3 years, which was done. And that was supposed to be over, but people just kept giving to it. And the last 10 years, it's not at 60,000 anymore. It's dropped down to about 20,000. But 2/3 of that amount every year goes to paying down the principal. So, it's not done yet, and we're just so thankful that 20 or 30 or so people or families that give to this fund has been a blessing and will help us pay this mortgage down. Just for your information, it still is on track to be paid down in 2031, 7 more years. So it's a ways to go. But okay, moving on. Audit report. At least Dennis didn't leave the audit committee. First of all, Dennis and his crew of Sandy Christensen, Jim Harper, Brandon Meyer, and Linda Landwehr conducted the audit a week ago yesterday, and they found, in summary, based on limited procedures, the funds and accounts present fairly the financial position of Farmington Lutheran Church as of 12/31/2024, and the results of its activities for the year just ended. I don't know how many of Linda's here. Linda's always here. Thank you to Dennis and the crew for doing the annual audit. Let's see. Questions? Anybody have any questions about 2024, where we've been or what we've been up to? Sure, Janice? Come on. Okay. Okay. I know, I hear you. Yes. Well, yeah. I will address that in the 2025 budget. So it's coming up. But that's an important part of our plan for the future, is dealing with both our pastoral needs and our youth ministry needs. So it's on the agenda. Anything else? Okay, I guess we're going to move into, let me go back to the agenda. And it looks like transition update, and that's going to be Pastor Jeff. Thank you.
That was good. I've been worried that this is dying. Is it still working? Okay, good. First of all, I can make this fairly brief if you want it to be. Not that brief. Remember, I'm a retired bishop. I can do 20 minutes without saying anything. So I think a transition time for a congregation is an important time. It's also often an anxious time. Most congregations treat an interim like it's time in a penalty box in hockey. Just wait. How long is the penalty and how long do we have to stay here? A transition should be a creative time, a time when you tell your story well. And so I can tell you, by the way, Jared was going to be out of town, so if you need to chime in on any of this, where I see your transition team right now, they are still in the gathering information process. On February 22nd, that's still a date, we're going to have a Saturday morning when we talk about the history of this church, and not only where we came from, but hopefully where we're going. It should be a fun time. And I think transition, it doesn't have it's not time in the penalty box. It doesn't have you start now and you end then. I remember when one of my good friends, I was in seminary, he called and he said, I want you to be my best man at my wedding. Gwen and I are getting married after the corn's picked. And I said, well, when's that? And he said, when it's ripe. And so that's how you should look at a transition is, how long does it take you to tell your story well? And I think the transition team has done a really good job of getting started with that. And you begin to tell what is the heartbeat in this place. That's what you have to share. I think you're always looking for a soundbite rather than a term paper. If you can say very simply to others what makes Farmington Lutheran so very special, that will send a message to anyone who would come to be your next pastor. And it will send a very clear and loud message. And so I would encourage you to really get invested when they do this survey about what's the heartbeat in this place, what do you like about it, where do you see it growing, and those, so that's a very critical time to come up with that. And again, go for the soundbite if you can do that. I've told this, I had a son of the congregation when I was in Racine come back. He had helped turn around an inner city Los Angeles congregation. And I said, that's amazing. What's your secret? And he said, in this church, kids trump everything. Isn't that a great thing to be able to say about your church? I have to say, I think in many ways you already honor that kind of statement in this place. Let me tell you a couple things that I've observed in coming here. First of all, I think your pastor, Kevin, who I've not met, was a really good dude. And I think he did a wonderful job here. And that's always, it's always easier to follow someone like that than it is someone that wasn't. But when you have and he would have been a long-term pastorate, you develop a whole kind of culture around that pastorate. And so your task now is to lift up all those things and basically say, what in that culture do we need to keep and what do we need to leave behind? And there's usually some of both. It appears to me that you have an awful lot to keep in this congregation. The whole Wednesday night phenomenon just amazes me, that you have all these people, many of whom are members, many of whom are not, come, and they don't come just for recreation. They come for Christian formation, and they come to begin to share their faith stories. That, as I look at the whole church, is just amazing. And so that's obviously, I think, one of the things you want to double down on when you begin to tell your story. I can't tell you how exceptional that is. The other thing is, I've said this before, when I was in the bishop's election, they ask all these questions that you have to make up answers for, and they said, if you're a bishop, how are you going to staff the synod? And I thought, and I said, when all is said and done, I want to be the dumbest and the dullest on the synod staff. I was really disappointed in how quickly I fulfilled that promise to the synod. I think when I came here, I surveyed the wonderful staff you had. I got that satisfied on day one. You have tremendous gifts here. I think not only does everybody have a task that they do well, but I think the support they have for each other is phenomenal. And so that's one of my observations, and that's part of a really good story to tell. Again, I think again, there's no timeline on how you have to get this done. It's when it's ripe, you tell your story, and by the way, there is this misconception that the synod exists to try to find placement for their orneriest pastor. That's not true. When I was bishop, I just loved when we felt we helped the congregation get to the next best place with a great future, and so I can tell you that that's what your synod feels about you. And again, I used to tell people when they get anxious about that, I'd say there's 10,000 ELCA clergy. If you have the time and the money, you can interview every last one of them. We're here to try to help you narrow that down to what makes sense for you, and I think that's where you're at now. Jared, do you have anything else you want to throw in? So that's, if there's a question or two, I'll take that and make up a good answer.
I'm sure this is the next thing that you're going to say, Jeff, but there are more opportunities to visit with you coming up on the calendar, right?
Yes.
That you're going to plug?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just I'm getting old. I forget these things. No.
February 2nd and February 16th, between services, Jeff's going to be available in the fireside room to ask questions and listen and complain about the Packers and whatever else you need to do.
Yeah, thank you. And so yeah, that's important. And basically an interim should be really fully engaged in this whole process. And I think what you can bring and what I bring is a fresh set of eyes to ask, why do you do it this way? How did you get to this place? And is this where you want to go? But yeah, so I intend to be very engaged in terms of the transition process. Once there's a call committee, the interim should step back and say, you know, it's up to you and the Holy Spirit from this point. Thank you. That's a good. Anything else? I'd say it's a pleasure to be here, and I really have felt that warmth that everybody talks about. I'll try not to screw that up.
Thank you, Pastor Jeff. Next up on the agenda is Michelle Beauvais. Michelle has been chairing our Constitution Committee. There's been some updates, and she's also going to be your president as soon as you vote. She will be the new president. And so, Michelle? Here, do you want to use this? Oh, it is working.
Just takes a minute. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So if you were here last year, these slides will look very familiar, as will what I'm about to say about the Constitution. Linda said I was chairing the committee that was looking at our, it sounds very official. It's been quite the process, and we're not quite done yet, because as you heard earlier, it's been kind of an eventful year. So we sort of put that work on hold for a little bit as we dealt with some other things. We're still working on it. But just as a reminder and to set kind of a foundation for everyone, FLC's Constitution is made up of provisions and bylaws and all sorts of fancy termed clauses. Some of them are handed down to us from the ELCA, some of them are handed down to us from the St. Paul Area Synod, that's what the SPA up there stands for, as well as we have our own bylaws very specific to our congregation. So every 3 years, the ELCA and the Synod review and make updates to their required language. There's required language that is sort of like a standard template for all of their churches. So last year, we voted to amend our Constitution to incorporate those, that required language, those changes that they made. Today, we're going to vote to ratify those changes. So there aren't any new changes to the language they're handing down to us. It's just sort of this very formal process where year one, you talk about it as a council and you say, yep, we're going to go ahead and incorporate these, and then we voted on it, all of us in our annual meeting, and then you wait a whole year, and then you ratify those same changes. That's just how the process works. So that's what we're going to do today. I think everyone should have a ballot. If you don't, raise your hand and we'll get you one. But that is one of the questions on your ballot, is to ratify those changes. So as you heard from Linda, we have been and will continue to be in the midst of a more in-depth review of our congregation bylaws, the ones specific to our church, to ensure that they reflect the way we currently practice our faith and engage with each other. So there's a whole section on ministry teams, some of which is very outdated. There's sections that talk about how we practice our faith. So we've been meeting as a small team, so shout out to Karen and Jeff and Chris for being on this journey with me, and to Kristen and Ben for all their guidance on that language as well. We will continue that process. We expect to have more to share with you this time next year. So, but we haven't, like I said, we set down some of that work and we'll come back to it. So just as a reminder, these are the required updates, or a little bit about the required updates that we approved in our 2024 annual meeting. So it was very minor language changes to the required ELCA Synod provisions. They included things like updating the statement of purpose to include, that's up here, advocating dignity, justice, and equity for all, caring for the marginalized, embracing and welcoming racial and ethnically diverse populations, standing in solidarity with the poor and the oppressed. There was a lot of language changes that they made, just removing pronouns he and she, and instead referring to either specific roles, specific titles of the person that they were talking about in that provision, and then removing the words physical and mental, instead referring to either disabilities or incapacity of those filling key leadership roles, and how that would be handled if that were the case. So I don't know that we had a lot of questions or a lot of discussion about this last year, but I'm happy to take any questions that anybody has about ratifying those changes that we approved last year, if you have them, or about the Constitution in general. We could talk about it for hours and hours and hours.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, John. Okay, yeah, you can hear me. Okay, so the next order of business is the elections. And do I understand you all have ballots? They've been handed out. And so thank you to all of the people who have agreed to serve on council and the various ministry teams. Thank you to Michelle for putting together the Constitution update and ratification. And I think if you've all marked your ballots, then somebody comes around and collects them. And so, yes, Peg. Peg has a question. Sure. So we do have some new folks. So just so you know, council term is 3 years. According to our Constitution, council members can serve 2 consecutive 3-year terms. So you'll see my name on the ballot because this is the end of my 3rd year of my 1st term, and I agreed to serve a 2nd term. So you have to vote for me again. Don't tell me that, you know, if you choose not to, don't tell me. I don't need to know that. And then we have some new council folks, some new folks who have agreed to be on our council. We have Mike Woody and Betsy Graw and Steve Cheddar, and Steve is over there, and who am I missing? Jessica. Thank you, Jessica Campbell. So thank you to everybody. You know, Kevin always did the recruiting, and it was really hard to say no to Kevin. And so when Kevin wasn't here anymore, I'm like, no, I have to do all this recruiting. And actually, Kristen, I pleaded with Ben and Kristen to help me, so thank you. You got Clara involved. Excellent. Yeah, who can say no to Clara? So thank you for agreeing to put your names in for council. You guys are going to love it. It's a great experience. So as soon as the votes are tallied, oh, we can't collect the ballots yet because you have to hear the budget and vote on the budget. So, see, I am so sorry. It's good that I have good help, right? Okay, so then I'm looking at my agenda here. We do need, oh, did we vote to ratify the Constitution? Did we do that? It's on there, okay. And so Bob's going to come back up and present the budget for 2025. And I do really have to thank Bob for choosing to serve this year because he really didn't want to do it. I think it was me. And when it was clear that we weren't going to have anybody, he said yes, he would. So thank you, Bob.
Linda,
Yes, I'm getting flagged over here because I'm missing something.
some churches you're required to open the ballot. I pray
Oh,
that
you're
that
right.
doesn't happen
I'm
to you.
supposed to call for additional nominations for the ballot for all of the positions that you see there. So if you want to, nominate the person sitting next to you, this is your opportunity. Did you have a question, Paul? No? Okay, so there being no additional nominations, then we'll ask you to vote for the folks, or not vote for the folks who are on your ballot, however you choose. So thank you. Oh, I was supposed to advance the slides.
It's all right. Got it. Okay, as I get started with the 2025 budget, I would borrow some helpful words from Pastor Kristen in saying that having to turn to the 3 budget pages in the annual report at this time is an invitation only and not an obligation. Please do so only as you are comfortable. Or she would say, get up and walk around too. So, thank you, Kristen. Okay. I will try to keep this expedited. So, the number we settle on for 2025 is $930,000. That is considerably less than last year's budget of $964,000. And it's still a bit lower than it was in 2023. For receipts, this to be a $38,000 increase over 24 actual, and that's a 4.3% increase, but we've done it before and we believe we can do it again. For expenses, one more note on the receipts. We do expect some sort of special appeal in the spring, as we have done before. It's not something we like to do. Well, we like to do it for the special projects, and we hope to have a special project we can pair with the general fund appeal that would help raise funds for a much-needed new electric sign for out by the south entrance. Our property committee has been studying that for a long time, and we're hoping to get that going. So there will be a special appeal. It's hopefully the response has been great in the previous years, and we'll try it one more time, maybe get to where we don't need one every year. On the expense side of the budget, $930,000 represents only a marginal increase of $11,000 over 24 actual. That's 1.2%. On the expense side, the budget includes a 2% pay increase for staff, which we wish could be more, but is in line with past years. Frankly, we are able to do as well as we do in keeping expenses under control, thanks to the very mindful work of our wonderful staff. I appreciate it, and I think the congregation should appreciate it too. The last point I would note is that in this time of pastoral and youth ministry transition, the council has budgeted 2.5 FTEs for the current staffing of these two ministries. We are hopeful that as this transition process unfolds, a more long-term plan will emerge. For now, however, we believe this budget does provide for adequate funding for these two ministries. And if you want me to have a further question about that, yeah, I mean, the budget in the 2.5 is our interim pastor and 1.5 for Ben and Kristen handling pastoral duties and youth duties. In the future, when the interim pastor has completed his term here, then we will be looking for an associate pastor. And so the, pardon? Yeah, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. A senior pastor, whoever that may be. Thank you, Karen. Okay, there's the budget. Does anybody have any questions about the details? Okay. In how many people? Well, there hasn't been an accurate count, but when I was treasurer before, I used giving. Anybody who give, obviously, is a active member of this church. We have over 500 giving families, and that works out to be anywhere north of 1,500 confirmed members, and probably well over 2,500 total members, counting all the kids. Does that answer your question a little bit?
I'm just going to repeat it for the live stream because they can't hear the question. The question is, how many members do we have in this church? I'll say from a leadership perspective, it's a really goofy question. Well, it's a goofy answer. Your question's legit, but it's a goofy question if you want it to be, Carolyn, because I think the metrics are changing in terms of how we count things. Because in reports that you send to synods and so on, we affectionately say it's butts and bucks, right? It's people that sit in there and worship and dollars in the bank, but that's not always the most accurate representation of what we've got, because I think one of the things that Jeff mentioned being impressed with is the Wednesday night situation. We've got 320 some kids in programming, 160 kids in confirmation and pre-con, and a small portion of them are here regularly on Sundays and whatnot, and that number doesn't show up in the kinds of reporting that's classically been gathered. So I don't know what percentage of our Wednesday night chaos is technically members or a regular worship attendance, but it's probably as many people or more people here on Wednesday nights than there are on Sundays, and so that's a really interesting. It's a good. It's not quite. We do technically, but I'm saying that we don't have a membership count the way that we used to. We do. It's just not always the best metric for representing the life of the congregation, I think. Sure. For the live stream, the question is, with the size of the congregation and the number of people we have here, it's somewhat surprising that our budget is under $1 million budget.
It's hard. That's an incredibly difficult question to ask about why, if there are 500 giving families, does it not total more than $1 million? It's a simple fact. 200 families, for one reason or another, perhaps they're unable, do not give a great amount. I mean, the number of active givers is been very steady over the years, and in these days, that's an accomplishment. So, like I said, we maybe get this mortgage paid off, and things will look a lot better. Well, That's down the road. Way down. Yeah, well. Any other questions about where we're at financially? Okay, I guess the budget question is on the ballot. Okay, then Light of Christ Awards is next. Right now, they're due.
So we'll move into the Light of Christ Awards. For those of you who don't know, these are the folks who have been nominated by leadership at Farmington Lutheran, staff at Farmington Lutheran for excellence in volunteering.
I think that comes from the council. If it's
So we'll move into
the
recognizing
ballot.
some people for that as the ballots are being filled out and collected. That's true. Linda, as this is already happening, would you ask for a motion to approve the budget?
Oh, yes. Peter, Elliott, motion to approve the budget. Can I get a second, please? Jay Bago, is there any discussion? Any further discussion on that?
You don't need to call the vote. They'll vote here.
Okay, excellent. So we've recorded that there was a motion and a second. And there's no Speak now or forever hold your peace, as they say. Okay, awesome.
You know, if Kevin's watching, he's face palming hardcore at our disjointedness at home, but that's okay. You left. Deal with it. Yes. There are a number of people whose names have come up for Light of Christ Awards this year, and this is a way for us to recognize as a congregation folks whose efforts have been noted and are being approved, and we're grateful for them. And so I have a couple to start with. First is Katie Blaha. I mentioned her already with her haircut clinic with her colleagues. It turned into a backpack drive and more, and there's already conversation about continuing that going forward. She's also a power volunteer. She has a pre-con 6th grader, 2 other kids. She was here for Camp Emmaus just on Friday, and Sunday school as well. So she's not here today because she's working today, but Katie, you've been recognized as a Light of Christ Award for you. We'll do all of them together, and we'll call all of you up at the end, and you have to stand here, I am told, lovingly been told by Jen Watts so that we could see you on the camera. The next 2 that I have are Kent Smith and Linda Heimerl. Kent, if you don't see him in worship sometimes, it's because you're facing the opposite direction. So Kent has stepped into a role that we have hired for the sound booth. So Kent, where is Kent? Can you here somewhere? I see you, Kent. Thank you. So, well, thank you. You stay there for the second. But there is a lot that goes into live stream and sound, and there's a lot that goes on in between all the things. And so Jen has often done that in the past with a slew of volunteers. Kent has stepped into that hired role and has taken that on with grace and some innovation and sound expertise, and so we're grateful for you. I fielded a phone call last week from a gentleman in outer the Chicago area who sent us a generous donation to the church. And called to say, I looked for a church during COVID and I found you, I'm still watching you. And so there are some people all over the place who are still connected through Farmington Lutheran as their church home, even though they are only here virtually. The body of Christ has always been virtual in some way, and it's also digital now too. So Kent, thank you for stewarding that as well. Linda Heimerl is a musician who has stepped into the role of accompanying the choir. Linda's right here. Comes from a lot of music experience in other places, but you lent your expertise and your gifts to us in this place, so thank you very much for that. You have afforded Carissa the ability to conduct only and not conduct and play at the same time, but also for Carissa to be gone occasionally, which is not a thing that she's able to enjoy very often. So thank you very much, Linda, for who you are and what you have brought to this place too.
All right, the next one.
Okay.
You can hear me? Okay. Is Jessica Campbell, who is going to be joining council. And Jessica is another just volunteer extraordinaire. We can send out an email saying, we need drivers, or we need somebody in the kitchen, or we need some cookies, or we need supplies, or I need somebody to show up and be present at this event. And it's just, I can, without fanfare or any need for what's happening right now, recognition. But we are really thankful for you, Jessica. So thank you. And the next one, we wanted to recognize Sarah, Linda, Woody, and Stacy Bannock. They're both back there for their work getting the Sunshine Singers up and running again. And when we said we wanted to do that, they said, well, we want to make sure that our singers are included too. So there's one for all of the Sunshine Singers as well. Because they said that each week when they rehearse, they tell the kids that every time the kids are up there singing, they are shining Christ's light. And this is the Light of Christ Award. So for both of you, for all of your work and the talent that you're sharing with us, and for the kids that you are stewarding too, we're grateful. So thank you.
The next is a series of 4 for our cemetery board. Paul Hauk did that faithfully for quite a while and has turned that over to a crew who are working in lots of ways through lots of notes and spreadsheets and some new software and all kinds of things. For those of you that don't know, we do have a cemetery. It's not on site, which if you haven't seen it here, it's not here, so you're not seeing things that aren't there, which is good. But it is a little ways out through a gravel road, very, very classic small town looking cemetery plot. But there's a whole crew of people who are now mapping that and catching up with all the things that Paul faithfully left notes on. Those people involved are John Albright, Chris Aiken, Linda Morris, and Chris Luber. So thanks to all of you for your work formatting. John's here. Raise your hand. Nope. Thank you for that work.
And then we have another sort of trio. We wanted to say thank you to June Olson and to Diane Randall. Are you here, Diane? I thought you maybe not. Okay. So June and Diane are transitioning with Pat Orndorff, who is also a recipient this year, in handing off the harvest market. And this was the first year they kind of all shared that leadership and did so graciously and did a fabulous job. And that harvest market is a gift to the community. We have so many, hundreds of people who come into the building to get to experience the different vendors and do some fun shopping. And then also, as is June's story, sometimes they stay, poke their head in for one thing and get connected. So we are just really grateful for the ways that you are taking that on. And Pat, for the years that you stewarded it, and also for all of the other ways. Pat is another behind-the-scenes, get-it-done servant, who, everything from the kitchen to visiting some of our members who can't get into the building anymore, and making care kits and all sorts of wonderful things just of your own volition. We're really grateful. So for Pat and June and for Diane, thank you.
If you would all make your way up here, maybe along this space over this way. We will recognize all of you so we can see who you all are and hand you your Light of Christ Award.
If you don't walk up now, Jen's going to come find you.
Jen will find you. So come on forward, please, all of you. And we'll hand these out as we see you. We can recognize you all at once. And if we're close with ballots, then we're getting close to that time too. Here's John. I'll give you both of those.
Okay, so the results of the ballot are complete. Is there somebody officially who tells me that everybody is voted in and the budget passed? And no, nothing official. But we're going to go with it because you all voted and we have a quorum, and so are there? Oh, they're still counting. Okay. I know some old Sunday school songs if you'd like to hear anything. Dawn, you can join me. Everything passed, so everything on the ballot has passed. Thank you very much. And at this point, I would like to turn the meeting over to your new president, Michelle Beauvais.
Okay. Okay, thank you. We will be adjourning shortly, but before we conclude, I do just want to take a moment to recognize and thank those council members who are completing their service today. Serving on council is a commitment of time and talent, regardless of what's going on. And as you've heard many, many times this morning, 2024 was an especially eventful year in the life of our congregation. So these individuals have been selfless, faithful, and steadfast in their dedication to our church family. It only seems fitting to present them with a small token of our appreciation for helping FLC to weather the storms, big and small, of the past year. If you will, please join me up here, if you're here. I want to recognize, first of all, Whitney Quast, who isn't able to be here today due to a family commitment, but who is completing her 3-year council term today. Bob Brownowell, who's already up here with me, who graciously stepped in to serve as our treasurer over the past year. Jeff Tickle, if you want to come on up, Jeff, who is completing his 3-year council term today and has generously offered to serve a second term. Chris Lynch, who is completing his council term today and rolling right into a term on the finance committee in order to fill the role of treasurer for us. Chris, I don't know if you can, but if you can, you need to come up here. And finally, last but not least, Linda Landwehr, our outgoing council president, who has also offered to serve a second council term and act as my personal mentor, which I had a conversation with your husband. He says you're a very good wing woman, so I'm very grateful for that. And Linda also once admired my golf umbrella on a very, very rainy, I don't know if it was a council meeting or an exec meeting, but we all parked under there like we owned the place and came running in because it was so stormy, and I had this huge umbrella, and we had a long conversation about umbrellas. Anyway, thereby she provided the inspiration for this gift. So please join me in thanking Whitney, Bob, Jeff, Chris, and Linda for their time, engagement, faith, and leadership with your applause. Green and white. One, there just aren't a lot of options, and green is kind of one of our colors, and they're embroidered with our logo on them.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you all.
Was that your idea?
Well,
It is a nice umbrella. She does have a really nice one. Thank you. Wow, these are serious umbrellas.
Thank you guys very, very much. Okay, so with that, I am going to call for a motion to adjourn, unless y'all want to stay and talk about other things. Thank you. Paul was very quick to raise his hand on that one. All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think Colleen, okay, and Phyllis is going to third it, and everyone else can fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh it. Yeah. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, with that, I'm going to ask Jeff to close us out with a prayer.
and ask your blessing upon this day and tomorrow. I ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. I had my mic on the last